Let me check to see if this is on now. It's not on. Is this working now? Does this work?
Yeah, use this one. This one is for up there. This one is here.
Okay, so I need to know how it's turned on for passing. Oh,
It's on.
it's on.
Yep.
Okay.
See?
Okay.
I think so.
It wasn't before. Okay, we're about ready to get started with the panel portion. If we could have everyone's attention, please. Thank you. So if you can take your seats, the fundraising person is part of the panel, so she needs to get up here. Okay, I'm going to introduce the panel members in the order that I have the papers here, and the first one I have is for Peggy Morphew. Peggy is not what you would think part of a traditional lineage society. She is the administrator of the Arizona Pioneer and the Arizona Second Wave. And this is done through ASGAB, which is the Arizona Genealogical Advisory Board. Peggy, you can go up and take a chair.
Oh, I get
You get to sit.
I don't like heights.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay. Pam Sermon. She visits us here from Tennessee for about half of the year, and she is in a number of, she's coming up also in the green shirt. She is a member of the DAR, the Colonial Dames, the Huguenot Society of America, the Hereditary Order of the First Families of Massachusetts, Mayflower Society, Colonial Dames of the 17th Century, First Families of Ohio, Hereditary Orders of the Families of the Presidents and First Ladies of America, First Families of Pennsylvania, and the Order of First Families of Connecticut. And standing behind me so that we is Mark Davis. Mark is the regent from of SAR. Registrar, yes. The important job. Registrar of the Saguaro SAR, that's Sons of the American Revolution, the Saguaro chapter. Yes. Janet Buchanan, also wearing green. I guess I'm wearing the wrong color today. Associated Daughters of the Early American Witches. What, did you bring your wand? Continental Society of the Daughters of Indian Wars, Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War, I think I misdid that. Mayflower Society, National Society Colonial Dames, 17th Century, National Society Daughters of American Colonists, National Societies of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Oh, that's DAR. National Society Dames of the Court of Honor, Daughters of Colonial Wars, National Society United States Daughters of 1812, National Society's New England Women, and she has various coats of arms. Standing right here beside me is Twyla Lobitz. She's regent of the Agua Fria chapter. She is also the state VIS chair and the national Southwest Division vice chair for VIS. Okay. And you're the registrar of WVGS. And Janet Buchanan does much, much, much with our Collections and Development Committee. here, and Peggy Morphew you already got to hear about today. Thank you. Okay. Janet Buchanan and Jean Senchek, where's Jean Senchek? Right over here. Put together, finally we have a contact list of numerous local chapters of various lineage societies. They're still making some changes on it, but that list is up there. Maybe you want to wait a couple of days to download it and print it up because they've got some corrections, but we will keep that up to date so that members here can check on the various lineage societies that they're interested in. Okay, panelists. Okay, I have to be honest about this. I am the education director, but Twyla's working on me. But I am not a member of any lineage societies. And once I asked somebody about it, and they said, oh, you just see the registrar. What? What registrar? Where do I find this? It's like, and they're like, well, the registrar, just see the registrar. Well, how much do I have to know before I see the registrar? What do I do? Who do I contact? Well, the contact list will help you, but with the panelists, please answer that question a little better for those who don't know how to get into contact and who they contact for the various groups. We don't need a list of every organization from Pam and Jan, though. Okay. Is it on?
Can you hear me? Oh, good. So I'll speak to DAR. Actually, you should start with what you know and gather the information that you have. You'll need birth certificates, marriage licenses, and death certificates. And then actually, once you contact us, we can get you in touch with the registrar for DAR. And I'm sure I'll let the others speak to their lineage organizations.
And yes, okay, go on.
Well, you asked about how they could get started finding.
Finding
you will have the list on the website, but you can always Google the national organization, and they will send you information or to the state, and then you can kind of go from there. But that would really be the best way to do it.
Okay.
All right. And to further hers, yes, it's a lineage society. So you have to make a connection to each generation, starting with yourself and going back, and depending on the organization, how far back.
So for SAR, probably the easiest way to get going is to reach out to a local chapter. We do all our applications online. You do not have to make contact with a local chapter to start an application, but ultimately it does have to get to a local chapter in order to process an application. To get started, I would also say going to the national website, sar.org. There's actually a section there about joining. You can scroll down there and it will talk you through how to set up a new user account to create an application or multiple applications. There's tutorials on there on everything you would need to do as far as gathering all your data. And then there's also a connection there to get to a local chapter. And likewise, we organized here in Arizona in the good Lord, we just celebrated our 125th or 130th not too long ago. You can go to the chapter or the state website, and that will also show you a map of where each one of the different chapters is located. Saguaro chapter, I'm the registrar of Saguaro. We pretty much draw our members from west of the 101. So I'm in Buckeye, down by Stephanie, but we have members that go all the way north up to I see some of our members here today. We have members that go all the way north up into New River and that area up there, all the way south. Our biggest chapters, of course, are going to be with the biggest cities. So, you know, if you're on the west side, you'd be with us. East side, you'd be with the chapters that represent that area. Central, of course, would be Phoenix, and we have a huge chapter down in Tucson.
That reminds me, Mark, I forgot to do something I was going to do, so I'm going to interrupt. Would you raise your hand if you're here and you're a member of any lineage society? Okay, thank you.
So just remember, SAR is Sons of the American Revolution. You probably know Daughters of the American Revolution quite well. We're the guys.
Is that mic working?
Hello?
Let's go.
Hello? Yes, I'm going to talk to you briefly about the state genealogical societies. And I'm going to take a little survey here and ask how many of you are members of a pioneer society of a state, such as Pioneers of Indiana, Ohio, First Families of Ohio. Please hold up your hand, please. Oh, a lot of work to do here. Very briefly, I'll tell you the advantages of joining these. They're cheap. They don't cost but $20, $25, maybe a little bit more. When you send in your application to a state, a genealogist looks over your work. And for $20 for Illinois, that's well worth it. A genealogist will also help you. However, I can't talk about all of the states, but I have some handouts today for the Midwestern states and a few southern states. But of course, all you have to do is Google these, and they're usually called First Families of Arkansas, whatever. But it's well worth it to join, and there are so many advantages, and they have surname files. And you may find cousins. They have wonderful directories, and they have wonderful excursions. Indiana, I went on one on the Ohio River. My people came down on a barge, and that really meant something to me, to go a few miles on the Ohio River. We stopped in Madison, Indiana, saw some historic homes. Indiana has a pilgrimage. I've gone on one where they did the Quakers of Eastern Indiana. Ohio has the most wonderful library if you join theirs. Now you're saying, how do I do this? Your people for the Midwest must have been there, and please Google these, and I also have handouts about in the 1800s. Indiana is easy, it's before 1840. I think that's very easy. I think Ohio is before 1820, then they have a next certificate before 1850, then 1860, then 1880. But please go online and see these. They're inexpensive. A genealogist looks at your work, and they have surname files, they have Zoom meetings. They want to help you. The genealogist in Indiana, we just inducted the governor of the state of Indiana in the Indiana Pioneers, and she was very helpful in that. Thank you.
Okay, before Peggy goes on, real quickly on the First Families, some of the states, particularly states that are really active in this, also have county First Families. So if you happen to be, especially if you're somebody that goes back in the summer or something, you may want to check on those. I'm hearing a lot of scattered talking in the room, and it's difficult for us. Peg, you want to pass on to Peggy?
Sure. I just want to mention that I don't belong to any lineage societies, but had my husband been interested enough to do the work, which he wasn't interested enough to do the work, he could have belonged to every single thing that you guys just mentioned. First Families of almost every state of the Union. I really wanted him to be First Families of Texas, and I still, now you have encouraged me, I might go ahead and do it for him, because his people were there when Texas was the Republic of Texas. So even before statehood. And I think that one would be really kind of cool. But anyway, I'm here today to represent ASGAB, which is the Arizona Genealogical Advisory Board. We kind of help all this local genealogical societies in the state. But my job with that organization is to issue pioneer certificates. And a pioneer certificate for Arizona is for those of your ancestors or relations. They don't have to be direct. They can be collaterals. And those are for those people who were here before statehood, which was February 14, 1912. So it was Valentine's Day. And so then and any time prior to that, of course. And then the other certificate is called Second Wave, and that's for those of us who came after February 14, 1912, up to the 1950 census. Now, I qualify for this. However, my parents were here. They went back to New Jersey. Well, they were here in 1928. They were here until the beginning of 1930. Then they went back and did the 1930 census back there. Then they came back to Arizona for a while. Then they went back for the 1940. So I have no real proof because they were renters and such. I mean, they didn't buy any property or anything like that. But I am working on it because I did go to school for a short while. And if I can get some school records, then I qualify.
Well,
but my parents definitely qualify, so I'm going to get certificates for them. My older sister went to school, and I believe I have pictures, and I have, and that's all. And so far, they haven't allowed just photographs, saying that, you know, this is me and my dad, you know, type of thing, and have a date on it. But other than that, but my husband's family was here in 1942. So my kids do qualify, and I'll be getting them certificates. But, you know,
Okay.
It's a fun thing, and it is helpful.
Thank you, Peggy. Now, I've heard, for example, in DAR that some people, and I think some of the other organizations, I mean, I thought DAR were only people who, you were going back only to people who had served in the American Revolution, or in other societies only going back to that person. But then I heard sometimes you can do it on patriotic service or something like that. So could anybody tell me a little bit about that, or what is required of that person that you're going back to?
So for the SAR, and I think we mirror most of what the DAR does also, we look at patriotic service, civil service, military service, and then we also have a special category for signers of the Declaration. So when we talk about civil service, that would be anybody who worked within local government, county government, as part of the new states during the war period. So it has to be during the beginning of the war to the end of the war. Patriotic service would be anybody who helped through financing, through supplies, anybody who aided, anybody who served on committees, the committees of safety and the committees of recruitment, and even people who paid tax, supply tax. And it would be hard to find unless you had, you know, people who just didn't own anything and didn't qualify for taxes, it would be hard not to find a homeowner in some states that were part of that. It's much easier than just trying to find somebody who actually fought.
Okay. Anyone else on that, or that pretty much covers it? Jan?
Yeah, well,
Dana?
I've got one that I'm trying to get in right now. That'll be the last supplement that I have for DAR, and he was ward of the hogs. He was an older man, and they had to have somebody to watch the animals and make sure they stayed safe, and so he qualifies. I just found him.
Yay.
Now, another question I have is, let's say that my grandmother, she failed to complete her application, so she didn't. But let's say that my grandmother belonged to a lineage society. Now, I've heard that I only have to prove back to that grandmother if that's the case. Is that the way it works? As long as the person is still okay now?
Well, if she completed the application.
If she was actually a member?
Yes. Yes, you would just have to go back to her at this point. If it were, well, my great-grandmother went in 100 years ago, so I've had to reprove.
And we're going to talk about that in the next question.
But yes, if your grandmother went in and she had the information, then yes, you just come down to you.
She didn't, but that's
Yeah, same, SAR has a similar policy. However, we generally, if you can connect to an existing lineage, not just, you know, a person or a generation, but a particular lineage, and you have an applicant who was approved after 2012, then it's like a no-brainer. There's nothing much you have to do. 2012 was the year we quit accepting county books that would have mentioned service or relationships.
You're talking about something like a county,
History.
county history, county, all those bios they put in county
Yeah.
records and stuff.
Which doesn't mean that your earlier ones won't still be effective, but that's where we get a little more particular. And we will also accept DAR member applications, also with a cutoff that goes back to the mid-'80s.
Now, I've heard that DAR doesn't always accept yours, though.
Yeah, they don't, even though we have the same requirements.
That's the genealogist over in DC.
Yeah.
Anyone else on that question? I'm going to ask another one from that. We'll have questions at the end from people. Okay, now, seriously, I did look up some of my people, and I know this happens, and I'm not asking for myself because I probably know the answer. But for example, I have Jacob. Jacob has to be reproved. Something about his service. It seems there were more than one Jacob Straw in Westmoreland County that could have signed something called the Fort Allen Petition. And then there's another one that if you go through his son, I wouldn't go through his son, but if people do, they have to prove they've got the right information on the son, so they have to go back and do that. So can you talk on this where there's a question, a person looks up DAR or SAR or War of 1812 Society or whatever records, and they see that you can't just tack on to that. You have to reprove some of the stuff. Okay, am I right?
You are. Well, no.
That's correct. So sometimes they find in doing multiple applications that there's more than one person. So we have to go back and prove that you have the right person and the right lineage. However, that's why we have registrars to help us. Correct, Mark? So they can help you and guide you of what you'll need if that occurs. It's not often, but lucky for you, it is. Sorry. But we do have helpers to help us, so.
Yeah, I'd also say, have any of you ever constructed a genealogical proof argument? Okay. I love doing these anytime you have a brick wall or we have a lot of bad data that we've collected in our trees over the last 45 years. So one of the things that we will do, and it's not just that last generation, but it's any generation between you and your target person, you may have to do a genealogical proof argument. And that may be you don't have a death certificate, you don't have a will, you don't have anything that actually says this person is the son or daughter of this person. But you can create a genealogical proof argument by taking all the information you do have, or in the case of two people with the same name, you can prove how that family can prove out. You can create an absence of them being qualified to be this line.
So maybe I should ask when somebody, I've seen one application that for some reason somebody showed us all their stuff on it, but I'm not going to ask you, you know, there's things that are acceptable for proof coming through, and I know people will go through their registrar or whatever for this, and there's items that they're not going to take. For example, your county family histories or those wonderful ancestry trees.
It's not a true source,
We
correct.
know it's not a source for much of anything. A clue.
And each organization may have different rules
Yes,
on
yeah.
what they will and will not accept. So it kind of depends. You do have to work with your registrar about that.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I know our organization has literally a document that new members get that, or new applicants get that says, here's what you can submit and here's what you can't. And, you know, once you start getting into derivatives, you know, people are gonna say, you know, instead of sending me a derivative of a will, can you get the actual will?
Okay, and just stopping Mark right there, does everyone here know what a derivative is? Okay, if you don't know what a derivative is, it's something like a transcription of a will, something where somebody copies it over, for example.
Yeah, an abstract.
Or it could be an abstract where they put certain important items from the will.
Right.
And those would be derivatives.
Yeah, anytime you get away from that original, every time you come down from an original document, you introduce the possibility of errors.
May I say something also? In your genealogical search, which you've all done, I would express to you, please go into one of these societies and have a genealogist look at your work, at least the one line. This is your next step in your genealogical research. Otherwise, you're saying, I'm related to such and such, I'm related to such and such. Yeah, really? Have a genealogist look at it. And like I said, Illinois, $20, come on. More expensive than the other organizations and more generations. So I suggest that you start first with the state genealogical societies, because some of you may only have to prove 4 or 5 generations for Arizona here, probably 3 generations. And then I go to the Midwest and maybe 7 generations, whereas Mayflower, it's 16, 17, 18 generations. With DAR, I've done 6 generations, I've done 11 generations for DAR. So start with if you're scared, you're afraid, start with these small ones first where your people came in fairly early, and do 3 or 4 or 5 generations and get confidence in yourselves.
Katie has something.
I would just like to encourage you, if you do have Arizona ancestors or relatives, to consider getting a certificate. The certificate is lovely. There are 2 different ones, and they're suitable for framing or not. But it names the person who you're related to, and it gives acknowledgement of, many times the people that you are descendant from, his name never comes up again. It's never mentioned ever until you mention it, and you keep it going. And so the paperwork, as I'm sure it is with DAR, SAR, and of course the First Families, is kept on file. I mean, it's not that you do it and you're the only one that ever sees it and it's there. The Arizona Pioneers, which it involves both the second wave and the Pioneers, their documentation is on file at the state archives in Phoenix. So it's safe, in other words. And then somebody can come behind you and maybe be able to get sources that they would never be able to get otherwise.
Isn't some of yours online too? Yes. Most everyone has a website, every organization, and you can, especially the registrar that you're working with, can go in and get papers that may help you also. But yes, that's a really good point, is somebody says, why would I do this? It is a lot of work, but why would I do this? Well, you're honoring those people that came before you, that fought in a war for this country, and this may be the only way that they are recognized. So, to me, I kind of look at it that way too.
So, and when people go in and see the registrar, they're going to be turning in actual documents, and they're probably either the actual document or
You're always doing a copy. You're not doing
you're doing a
an
copy.
original.
So it's going to be like I just turned in for a course, where when I was turning in documents, I was turning in a digital image of an original source, and I was telling where I got that source from. So, correct.
That's it.
Okay.
You're right also on, if you want to prove to people that you're a real genealogist, just fill out an application. Even if you don't put it in, fill it out, and if you can fill it out with a birth, death, and marriage, at least the first 3 generations. After that, it becomes questionable, the documents you can get a hold of. But if you can prove back to DAR or Colonia Dame 17th century, which means you have to have had someone here before 1700 who was a freeman or a property owner. If you can put that on paper with all of the documents, you're probably better than 3/4 of the trees on Ancestry.
Yeah.
How about
easy.
90%? So,
Okay, yeah, I want to push the First Families type of thing, because I think it took a lot of guts to go from where you were to a new territory and be in the first part of it.
yeah, the First Families, the dates, Pam gave us some dates, but they vary considerably, because I have looked into First Families, they vary considerably from one state to another. And even within a state, if there's county First Families or something similar, the different counties, their starting dates vary considerably depending on when that part of the state was settled, I believe. I'm going to ask you now, We've talked about how people get in. So what are the benefits when you get in there? Do you just get a nice certificate or what?
Have the privilege of buying pins. Well, in the organizations I belong to, it's you're meeting fellow genealogists or people interested in their family, friendships, but honoring, like I said, honoring those that are past, and just keeping those kinds of things alive.
Well, and I won't speak for Mark, but I'm sure we're on the same page. We're a service organization, so we serve the community for education, historic preservation, and patriotism. So I'm sure you've seen me in Sun City, in the newspaper. We do a ton of things. We recognize our veterans. We give a lot of things to the community. We work with Canyon Ridge School, and we do a Constitution Day out there. I do Civics Day. We teach the kids all about our history. And so I think it's important to get involved and to spread our history, right? We want everyone to know about it. And the only way we're going to do that is to get out in the community and share. So that's what we do, but I'll hand it over.
I agree. Most of the ones I belong to do have a service portion of it also.
Yeah, and I think the fellowship, you mentioned that earlier, getting together and meeting people. One of our members is in the back, Tom Drummond. It's always great when I get to, that once a month, we all get together for breakfast, have a meeting, have a speaker. I get to see Tom, and sometimes that's the only time I get to see our members. But we always share that same value in that we have that essence of patriotism and service, and we're proud of those individuals, whether they're related to us or not, who did sacrifice to create a country or to be that first family that came somewhere. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
I'm going to open it up. I'll come back to the panel and ask for last thoughts later. I'm going to open it up to some questions, but I want to be very specific before we get to questions. The questions I asked were just as moderator. They did not relate to really my personal family things. Please keep your question general. In other words, we know you have some great ancestors. Please don't tell us all about your ancestors today. And please don't go into detail over a problem you have or what. Just a very short question, please. From anyone? Yes.
How would you know if your grandparents and such ever joined? If my parents have passed.
So I know for DAR, we can go on the website and look it up.
And look up their names.
Yep.
Anyone else? Come on, we have. He's got to turn it on.
Yeah, so for SAR, same situation. You can go to the SAR.org. There's a link there to the Patriot Research System. You can go in there. You enter in a name. It's going to tell you all about the Patriot. It's going to show you all the applications since 1967 that have been approved. You could go in and do a tree search to see all the people that are within that tree. If you're looking, so you can search by your grandfather and see if he appeared in any lineages. Great grandfather, did he appear in any lineages?
Pam?
Question, I know you don't use DNA now, but it's becoming so strong.
Yes.
Oh, they do use
Yeah,
DNA.
would you pass it over so that
We do use some DNA, especially for adoptees, but it is, I will warn you, very pricey. It's the same as a paternity test, so it's not your ancestry DNA. It has to be a very specific DNA. but we do. Does SAR also?
Yeah, that's most commonly right now. It's our rules are generation 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, and again, you have to. It's very much like not doing ancestry DNA. However, we are looking at expanding that very carefully. At our Congress this year, we're going to be entertaining some changes which will require a accredited, which is another problem since that's also something that the accreditation people are working on. But we're looking at, you would have to go to a Blaine Benninger or a CC Moore type person and have them come back and say, yes, based on all my research, I will certify that this person is the descendant of this grandparent or great-grandparent.
One of the problems being one of your DNA people here, a lot of times if you're going back more than a few generations with autosomal, you may be able to go back to a line that this wonderful patriot is in, but the problem is you don't know if that's where your DNA is coming from, that little segment. It could be coming from them, or it could be coming from somebody over here, or it could be coming from somebody over here. So that's an issue. So it's much easier for them to look at Y or special tests.
I recently did a DAR application with DNA autosomal, and first 3 generations, and the lady wrote her father, who she had never known, and he wrote a deposition and said, I am the father. She was adopted within 24 hours. Why I'm telling you the story is this was a school librarian. She went on, and this line took her to the Mayflower.
We also have a related thing that I know has come up with one of our members, and I understand it's not a problem, but if you have a line that's been proved and then you take a DNA test and you find out that daddy wasn't daddy, I understand it still stands, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I have a question. So would the Y DNA, would that work? Because that goes all the way back on male. Oh, okay.
You wouldn't be able to, well, the Y wouldn't come all the way down. You'd have to then prove that your brother was, we're getting into DNA here, but you'd have to prove a lot of other things.
I think that's what's like with us, you really need to go with, spend the $2,000 to hire somebody who's going to come back and certify that they've been able to triangulate you back, or that they've got all the bases covered.
So what happens with one of your SAR members? Let's say they come in and say, I took this DNA test.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell. That's what I thought.
Yeah, when one of the societies I belong to is the Blair Society for Genealogical Research, and they very early on set up a genealogy DNA group to test all the different Blair lineages in the U.S. And you talk about setting off a bomb in the middle of a room. It changed so many lineages, and we're not interested in going back and checking existing members. That's not the point.
No, I just thought, the question comes up at times. Okay, do we have another question in the room? Because Stewart is standing back there and he wants to get some exercise.
Do we have a list of all the panel members and the organizations that they belong to that we can check out?
We have a list that is partially done. It is up. It was done by Janet Buchanan up here and also by Jean Sinchak. It has most of the local chapters. We'll be adding some others. It has the contacts for those chapters. We will try to keep that up to date. And that would be the best starting place. There are a couple of corrections that Janet has caught that get to be made, but those corrections will go up, and Mark might be adding a few extra for SAR for us in the future. But we're trying to keep it as up to date as we can. At least you'll have a list of chapters and know somebody to contact. So even if it's not a chapter you're interested in, for example, in DAR, I presume you can contact that person and say, I live way over here. What's the chapter there and who would I contact?
I wanted the information on the lady, I think you said you were from Arizona, the one in the darker green next to Peggy.
No, she's from Tennessee, Pam.
You were talking about Arizona?
I'm from Tennessee.
Right. Oh, the Arizona one, okay.
But, oh, okay. I don't know about the First Families of Arizona, truthfully. I know that there are two organizations. One is called the First Families of Arizona, and the other one is called First Families of Arizona. Two different groups, evidently two different personalities. So, yeah, but those are the only First Families that I know of. But ASGAB is the only one that offers the certificates of through ASGAB, and they're the only ones that get filed at the state archives. The Pioneer and the Second Wave, yeah. Yeah, so, you know, clear up to 1950, early 1950, of course, you could get a certificate. It would have your name or your son's name or your mother's name if you want it, and then their ancestors. So in other words, I can put my children's names as on the certificate and have my parents' names, even though I would qualify maybe, you know, as the actual.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, up here.
This is a SAR question. I'm in the process of going through my application, so I've received the document that says these are the ones that are acceptable. But you also talked about this proof that some sort of preponderance of evidence. When the submission goes to the society, the genealogists look at it and they say yay or nay, and if they say nay, then there's kind of a back and forth. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, hopefully by the time it gets to them, we've worked all those out. I think that every registrar lives in fear of having a application rejected, because there's nothing worse than trying to go back to a member and or an applicant and try to fix something. So basically, if you put it on an application, whatever piece of information, every date, every place has to link back to a document. And it doesn't mean that you have to have birth and death certificates, but it does mean that you have to be able to prove the linkage between two generations. So like a will, wills are wonderful because it says my son, my daughter, maybe, hopefully, you know, and the same with you know, any type of mortgage applications. There's so many places. If you get into tax records, you know, you always find when a man turns a certain age, depending on the state, he appears for the first time in the taxes under his father. And so we can use those things as proof. Yeah, and sometimes that's why I say you have to build a proof argument, where you take a lot of those little pieces of circumstantial information and say, look, this is the only family in the county. Here's all the little bits and pieces that kind of make this. So, anybody else?
No. So you're doing all the things that good genealogists would do. Very good. It's you know, we're all genealogists here, so if we try to join a lineage society, we want to do some of our own work on it too, because rather than just sit back and.
I don't know that any of us have the bandwidth to do your genealogy for you.
No, I know. So that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, don't show up with a. Oh, I printed this tree out I found on Ancestry.
And even find a grave, the only thing most societies will accept is what's on the tombstone. Anything that anybody else has written is just somebody else wrote it. You don't know whether it's true or not. So.
And they have to be a contemporary stone to that.
Yes, because occasionally I've found stones for people, and other people have too, where it's obvious it was put up 50 or 100 years afterwards. Or find a graves where they tell what the cemetery, they just threw one in. Okay, any final thoughts from any of you?
I think we have a whole room of people who should be at least on 2 or 3 lineages. Because you all have done your trees, right? All right, there's the plug. I think everybody should have at least 2 or 3.
And if your wife's, or if you're DAR, get your husband into the SAR.
So you don't have to Google. I brought some state information for you. I have Michigan handouts, if you would like one. Ohio, Old Northwest Territory. Your people must have been, and you know the Old Northwest Territory goes all the way up to Wisconsin. They must be there before 1803. That's rather early. I have Indiana. I have Tennessee. Tennessee is early. Difficult to get in Tennessee before 1796 because Tennessee was once Illinois, Arkansas. I brought an application form from Louisiana if you would like to see what you complete. These are basically the same. I hope that you join a state genealogical society.
I brought a sample of some of the newsletters I get from my organizations. They're up here to look at. So you're welcome to do that. We also put some pamphlets up here for the War of 1812, Dames at Court of Honor, and DAC, Daughters of American Colonists. So if you want to pick up a pamphlet or look at the newsletters, that would be great. And any questions?
Right, and our chapter actually has a brochure over in the library, so feel free to go over there and grab it. And of course, I think probably all of you might even have my email address, so feel free. Questions?
We also have here, I know some other people who are regents or registrars or something. I know we have Marilyn Simlinus, who is regent of the White Tanks DAR chapter. Jean Sinchek is in something, what?
The state regent of Daughters of the American Colonists.
Okay, anyone else have any positions of that type? Terry is? Okay. Anyone else that wants to introduce themselves? Okay. Oh.
Would be able to get that information, so don't overlook that. The same with the Centennial Farms, Centennial businesses, And that, again, these people weren't necessarily genealogists. They were not necessarily going on to join these prestigious societies, but here they are. It's the same information. So don't overlook them, especially if you're stuck, say, in Michigan, my beloved state. Don't overlook Detroit. Don't overlook the sesquicentennial. And you know something? The archives had the nerve to keep all the documentation. They did not send it back. And that, so again, don't overlook that, because this is a strong complement to the lineage societies. And I don't know about you guys, but when my families moved west or stayed, they never told where that doggone family Bible went to. So that's a clue to find out other things. So it's a good complement to these wonderful organizations. I also want to say, someone asked about what is the benefit. Several of these organizations have fabulous, fabulous libraries that you do not have to be a member in order to access and use. The DAR, the SAR, the Mayflower Collection, is that housed only at HistGen now? But I know several states have. So don't overlook that too. Even if you're not going to join those organizations for that time period, they're excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, anything else? Really quickly, I'll take one question up here and then we're...
This may not seem very important right this second, but I think you'll see the correlation to this. But as a retired teacher, we had a local DAR group in Minnesota that would come out to our schools, from our elementary to our high school history classes, and we were able to bring down activities all the way down to my second graders about fighting and bullying on the playground, and how it affects, how do countries get along in history. And by having those representatives come out and do projects with our kids on the first people and all these different genealogical kinds of history, it made a difference. It really did. So even many of you could go to our elementary, high schools here and share what you know. Okay. My mother was a librarian at the high school and did, so that's all.
Thank you. Okay, I want to thank all the people. I know two of the, I think you still work, don't you, Mark? You're newly retired, so he's...
I kind of went from being full-time engineer to being a full-time genealogist, and I keep like, how did I ever have time to do genealogy before? I'm so busy now. So.
Twyla does all of this while working full-time in something to do with medical records. I cannot believe she has figured out, and this is a secret, she knows this secret and she's not sharing it, how to do something like about 100 hours in 24.
Twyla does not sleep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you all so much. We're going to give you an escort off the stage. That brings us to the end of this meeting. I'm going to suggest that the raffles take place in about 10 minutes, because we give people that do not want to stay for the raffles